In a few short months, a Colorado judge will decide if a 16-year-old girl should be tried as an adult for allegedly killing her 7-year-old nephew.
This is a story that dominated the headlines here in Denver earlier this year. Should the teen suspect be treated as an adult, face a trial like an adult, and be sentenced like an adult?
Tonight, Chief Investigative Reporter Tony Kovaleski goes 360 on this emotionally charged issue.
There's one thing to make a mistake and pick up a candy bar and walk out of the store.
It's an issue that challenges the very core values of our society.
Another thing to make a mistake and pick up a gun and shoot someone.
Even if they did something horrible, that doesn't mean they're not kids anymore.
A decision that challenges the foundation of our legal system.
You have to look at it from the perspective of the victim.
He's a former district attorney, and she's the sister of an inmate.
Everybody knows that teenagers don't make decisions the same way as adults.
Her brother sentenced to life without the possibility of parole after shooting and killing, a serious crime committed when he was a teenager.
Watching the way he was treated by the criminal justice system really left an impact on me.
Two passionate and educated advocates with two distinctly different perspectives and positions on this issue. Let's dig deeper.
The adolescent brain is very different than an adult brain.
April Alexander teaches at Denver University.
So we just can't treat them in the same way.
She's an expert on the psychology of the brain.
Adolescents have this opportunity for rehabilitation.
In recent years, studies into the juvenile brain and its development have changed public policy in Colorado and around the country.
We no longer sentence juveniles to the death penalty, so we're starting to take a different lens in our approach for juveniles in the justice system.
And those changes came back in 2006. Prior to that date, juveniles committing serious crimes could and were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Currently in Colorado prisons, there are 31 inmates. All committed crimes as juveniles prior to 2006, and they all were sentenced to a lifetime behind bars.
That day of the crime, did you realize what was about to happen to your life?
I had no idea.
Trevor Jones provides greater context. He is one of the 31 Colorado inmates sentenced to life in prison for a crime he committed as a teenager.
Did the legal system do you right?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer because I killed someone, and Matt's life had value.
Back in 1996, Trevor Jones confessed to what he called an accidental shooting of 16-year-old Matt Foley. The other side of this issue comes from the family of Trevor's victim. At the Capitol in recent years, members of Foley's family told Colorado lawmakers that Trevor should spend the rest of his life in prison.
The argument on the other side is that your victim will never get a second chance. So why do you deserve a second chance?
Well, I'm not sure I deserve it. Matt and his family and his loved ones never get a second chance because of what I've done to them. But maybe that's not the whole story.
A side of the story, a side of this issue that Trevor's sister has worked to change since the day he was convicted. She now has her law degree and works as a public defender.
He's been in prison for 22 years. He went in when he was 17, and I think that he's been punished.
It is absolutely one of the most difficult parts of the DA's job to make a decision that may send a tender-aged person into an adult prison system.
And that brings us back to the upcoming decision by a Denver judge. 16-year-old Jenny Bunsom currently sits in an adult jail, facing adult charges of first-degree murder for suffocating her 7-year-old nephew, a crime, if found guilty, that would send her to prison for a minimum of 40 years. If the judge decides to move her case to juvenile court, the maximum possible penalty for the very same crime is only 7 years. A difficult decision for a judge and a controversial issue our community continues to debate.
So there's big disparity there, and that's difficult for people to wrap their heads around. Fact of the matter is, 40 years from now, that 7-year-old is still going to be dead.
What do you say to our viewers who are wrestling with this issue of crimes, teenagers, and being tried as adults?
I would just ask people to consider the evidence And pretty much anyone who is over 25 knows that when they were 17 or 16 or 15 or younger, they're not the same person.
That 7-year-old doesn't care whether the killer was 16 or 60. He's still dead.
It's not fair that these innocent victims lost their lives, but it's not fair to keep these kids in prison forever either.
And we really want to hear from you on this one. What do you think is right here? What do you think's wrong here? Jump into the conversation on the Denver 7 Facebook or email us 360@thedenverchannel.com.